Good evening. Welcome to the first in a series of Exhibition Budgerigar forum interviews. These build on the original set that we did back in the formation of the EBF in 2010, that proved to be very successful. And as I say, this is the evolution of our online forum. I'm John Ashby. I'm the moderator of the EBF. I hope everyone is keeping safe and well during these very unusual unprecedented times. These interviews are being passed simultaneously across YouTube and Facebook, and you'll also be able to catch up on any of this or review it after the event. It will be on the EBF forum. So, who are we going to be interviewing? Well, we've decided that we're going to make these probably a monthly event, and then we have a real broad selection of fanciers who we're going to be interviewing. I expect this to last for about an hour. We may run over, but we'll see how we're going. And what we're going to do is try and aim to really dig into the background story of the people we speak with, trying to understand how they got into the hobby, their journey through the hobby and their successes, and to really pick their brains for every bit of information we can. I'm delighted that these are being cast right across the world. And as everyone knows, the Exhibition Budgerigar forum is the free resource for everybody to join. You really need to log on to www.exhibitionbudgerigarforum.co.uk. You can log in with Facebook or else register, and you'll be sent a password and you're in. There's tons of information on there. It's a real repository of knowledge and information. So, who are we going to be interviewing first? Well, I don't think this man needs too much of an introduction. He's a well-respected fancier, been in the hobby for an awfully long time. I shan't give too much away about him because I think he's going to tell us about it himself. He's a two-time club show winner, has been in a successful partnership as well as bringing exhibiting in his own right. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce and thank him in advance for offering his time up to answer our questions. But I'd like to introduce you to Mick Freakley. Hello, Mick.
Good evening, John. How you doing?
I'm very well. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Good, thank you.
Good stuff. So, straight into the questions, I think.
John.
So, you and your lovely wife Jackie, how did you first get into the hobby, please?
Yeah, no problem. I'd just like to say hello to everyone out there. Hope you're all keeping well and lockdown's not too boring and you're having a great breeding season. Right, John, to answer your question, Jackie wanted a pet budgerigar. I kept them in the late 60s, early 70s, and knew that there was a hobby out there and that I would be better to buy from a breeder than a pet shop. No internet in the day, as you can imagine. I contacted the Citizens Advice Bureau, who put me on to a guy named Frank Harmer, who was the secretary of the Leicestershire Budgerigar and Foreign Bird Society at the time. I rang Frank, he invited me down. We bought a budgerigar, a pied cock, who we called Rocky, for £5, and that got us into a budgie. Frank said that by coincidence on the Sunday of that week, the Leicester Budgerigar and Foreign Bird Society were having their members show, and we'd be welcome. So on the Sunday morning, we headed down to Silverdale Drive in Leicester to the show, and that was our first show, obviously, and that's where it took off. We met the likes of Robbie and lots of Frank Punchard and lots of the bigger names in Leicester at the time. We also met who is now our great friend Jeff Bowley. He was judging the show, and there was over 300 birds benched that day at a member show. And from then, yes, we were hooked.
Fantastic. And can you tell us about your route through the sections and how you progressed through each one with some sort of successes and notable achievements in amongst there, please?
Not too many notable achievements in the early days. To be honest with you, I never felt that we should achieve a lot in the beginner section, because I know people do now. They want to be winning best in show in the first fortnight of being in the hobby, and it was never like that with us. We wanted to learn the trade, as it were, and obviously in the first year you are really ranked beginners and have no idea, unable to tell the difference between an opaline and a normal, etc. And we respected the people around us, and we had great people around and successful people and people to advise us. And to me, that's the only way forward. But we came across a partnership called Bill and Wayne Bloxham from Oakham in Leicestershire, and from Rutland in Leicestershire, sorry, who were winning everything. And going through the 3 years beginner section, competing against them, we had very, very little success, I would say. I always had a desire to want to do one or two things in the hobby, and the first one was to win a CC, and the second one was to win a best in show, and then of course to win best in show at the World Show. But I remember popping into Bill's many a time to see his birds, and he'd sit in a chair, and his wife would bring us a cup of tea, and he'd say, "Have a look down the side of the chair, Mick." And I'd look down at the polythene bag, and there's a wad of challenge certificates as thick as my phone. And I loved looking at challenge certificates, where he'd showed, what he'd won with, and who judged it. But over the years, it got a bit annoying when I'd still not won a challenge certificate. But yeah, we had the odd success with, I think we had a beginner breeder within that 3 years, and a couple of young bird wins in section. So it wasn't all failure, but we were successful enough to get moved up to novice in the second year. But then it didn't get any easier, because Mick and Kate Richmond came on the scene, and they won the club show as novices in 1992 with the Cobalt Cock. They were winning everywhere. They were beating champions. They were winning up sexes as well as best in show, and as I say, culminating with the Cobalt Cock that won at the club show. They named it Morris, and we had a barbecue to celebrate, and I had a big blow up done of Morris, and I invited the club round and charged people 10 pence a time to throw darts at Morris, and it raised a few bob actually. But I got a phone call the following morning with quite an irate Kate Richmond telling me that, or blaming me for the fact that Morris had died that night. So I suppose I've got to carry that one on my shoulders. But yeah, so the novice section was very similar to the beginner section. We picked up a few more wins. We were quite successful in our own right, but we were up against one of the main winners in the country that time. And but again, we had no sort of thoughts that we should be winning at a higher level than the novice section, as Mick and Kate did. Let's face it, it's a one-off, and so we accepted that. We were pleased for them, and then of course we moved into the intermediate section, and people might be surprised to hear that it wasn't until third year intermediate that Jackie and we were shown as M&J Freakley. Won our first challenge certificate. So that's a long time to wait for a challenge certificate when the people around you and the people you socialise with and the members of your club at the same level are winning best in shows, or collecting loads of challenge certificates. And I remember at the club show when both I and Bill and Wayne were beginners, that this American guy there tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Are you Mr. Bloxham? I'd like to buy your opaline cock. I'll give you a blank check." And I said, "No, I'm not. I'm just a friend. This is Wayne. This is young Wayne." And he asked Wayne if he would sell that and the grey cock. And one of the birds, he'd mentioned an open check. And Wayne, who would be, I don't know, 11 or 12, something like that at the time, said, "No, thank you." So then we moved into into the intermediate section. And that's probably where we came into our own a bit, I think. I think when you've had 6 years, you've sort of got a bit of a background in the hobby now. You're not the rank beginner. You've had a little bit of sex in the novice section, although you're still in the novice section. I mean, beginner and novice sounds very similar, doesn't it? But we know in the budgie game it is different. But we moved into the intermediate section, and that's really when we started to take off a bit on the show scene. We had success, but again, never picked up a challenge certificate, as I say, until third year intermediate. That was at South Midlands Area Society Show. We won with a Youngbird Greycock, Youngbird CC. And Richmond's cleared up that day. They won virtually everything else. And it was very disappointing to hear Mick say to Kate when they were looking at our bird, "How did that win?" They knew how much it meant for us to win a challenge certificate. I was disappointed in that comment. But remember that Mick and Kate were friends of ours, good friends of ours, and we went out socially quite a lot. So I addressed that one on that evening when we went out. So that had no lasting effect on me. And
but does that not show just how competitive? Sorry, does that not show just how competitive the hobby is, though? It's
well, that was. Sorry, John.
I was just going to say, I think people who exhibit birds are just competitive by their very nature. So I think you're always going to get that, aren't you? That disappointment from people sometimes, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I understand it. But I would have liked that pat on the back that says, "Well done, mate. You've waited a long time for this." But it wasn't to be. And we are all different. And they say they were good friends. They still are good friends. So there's no problem there. But yeah, that takes us into the intermediate section really, and we did okay. We did okay in the intermediate section, definitely.
Excellent. So obviously, so at this point, before you go into the champion section, you've won a few. Presumably, you were winning sort of section awards, intermediates again. Would you just to ask you very quickly for sort of newbies into the hobby, is that really should that be their goal? Would you say one of their goals is to just try and beat those around you to begin with? Win in novice, as it is now, no more beginner, of course. Win novice, then move up, win in intermediate, and then go up, and then think about the bigger prizes. Is that the way?
Well, what I always say to people coming into the hobby, I'm asked for advice. This is the advice I'll give. And look, you're in the beginner section, at the bottom of the ladder. You've got 3 years. You should set your task to be the best beginner in your area after 3 years. If you're not, and you're miles back, you're doing something wrong. If you're not, and you're only just below the Bill Bloxham or the Kate Richmond in the novice, that type of thing, you're there or thereabouts. And why should you expect to win something outside your section at that start as a beginner? You are a beginner, let's face it, and that's your section. And the other thing is, if you do get a lot of success early on, you don't get a lot of credit for that, because that credit will go on the back of the people you've had birds from, believe it or not. Mick and Kate Richmond won the club show, and it's great to have that on your CV. But I was disappointed for them at the time, because a lot of the talk and the speak that was going around, oh, well, it's on the back of so-and-so, or it's the bird they've had from so-and-so. And they had to breed that bird. They had to prepare that bird. They had to get it correct on the day. They had to get it to the club show so that the judges could not put it up. So they deserve a lot of credit for that. But conversely, that they didn't get the credit that maybe you would get with 8 years experience in the hobby, and 9 or just approaching champion, in the intermediate section. So I think they were lucky in one way, lucky in one and unlucky in another. But yes, the sections were hard right through the section in those days. But yeah, win your beginner section, be the top beginner in your area, and then you can see where you are come the club show. If you get anything else, it's a bonus. But then you go in the novice section 3 year on, and you're competing against novices who are now 6 year in the hobby, and you're only just 3 year in the hobby. So you should set your sights that you want to be the best novice in your area in 3 years' time, and set the same criteria as you did in the beginner section. Again, anything that above that, it's a bonus. And then you're in the intermediate section, and that used to be very, very tough at the time. Not so much nowadays, but some fantastic people came through the hobby at that time. I mean, Ian Ainley, my partner, came through at the same time as me, and there were a lot more people like that we were competing against. who went on to become good champions. So it's never been easy, John, but it never should be. And if you're competitive enough and you want to win enough, I tell my kids, whatever you want to achieve in life, if you put enough effort into it, you can achieve it. I've proven that to myself, and I thoroughly believe that. So, yeah, stop being a beginner who's on Facebook, who's telling the world how good he is, and he's been in it 6 months. It's really grating, really. It's quite annoying. Learn your trade, and you'll get the credit you deserve then. Yeah,
So
that's about it.
So this kind of maybe not rushing is the key. This is, as you just said, it's not an easy hobby, is it? Gerald Binks called it the challenge. So being resilient and being dedicated, working hard, and not being downbeat is if you don't succeed early on, these are key things you should adopt, you think?
Most definitely, yeah. I mean, if you consider that for me to be a champion in the day, I had to serve 10 years. For me to become a judge, which is another ambition I had to serve another 3 years. So it's 13 years apprenticeship for me to become a judge. I think it's 5 or 6 years to become a brain surgeon. So as daft as it seems, it's a long, long time to wait. And,
Absolutely.
but, you know, to gain the credit that you want to gain, I do think you need to serve that time. I know the BS have cut it a bit now. I think you can go to champion in, is it 8 years now? I think it probably is.
Something like that, yeah. You're getting there quicker than perhaps.
Yeah, you get it may even be quick. But anyway, yeah. I just accepted that 10 years and 13 years I never questioned it. You know, I was never in a rush. I wanted to serve my apprenticeship and learn my trade, and I think it served as well. I think it gave us a great foundation for when the poo starts hitting the fan and everything's going against you, and you know I think it builds strength for you to stay in a hobby when other people who have not had that foundation will probably walk away. We know it happens, John. We've seen it on the EBF, you know.
So you don't want to strive for too much success too early, because you think you need to experience French mold, red mite, and get all these problems out of the way and really build your stud. And that way you get the credit you deserve. Also, you're kind of armed for the top sections. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that you should always strive for success. And if you get that success in your first year and you feel that you've earned it, give yourself a pat on the back. But don't expect it to come without the hard work. I mean, Jackie, it's a standing joke, really. I say, you know, I was obsessed by birds. I'd go to bed at night, and we were a lot younger, remember. And Jackie is still a stunning woman, but she was stunning in her younger days. And she'd be sort of putting her arm at me, and I'm saying, Jack, leave it. What's the matter? I said, I'm just thinking about a pair. Leave it a minute, leave it. I just couldn't get budgies out of my head, and I'd go in the shed to pair up, and I'd be gone 3 hours, and I'd come back to say, how many pairings you've done? I said, I've not done any. Because your best cock can, bear in mind, you know, we're never blessed with 100 best cocks in the shed, top cocks in the shed. So you'll find that your best cock can be paired to every hen in your shed, and improve those hens, or improve, you know, or give you the chicks that you might want off your better pairings. But there's always a chance that top cock with your lesser hen is going to throw you a good one out as well. And then you say, right, okay, I'll go with that. And then all of a sudden you see the other hen or another hen in your flight, and you think, I could put it to that. And then you start going through your head, what's the background of that? And where, you know, what's that bred in the past? And what's that line bred? And so it was so stressful. I know hobbies are supposed to be calming, but it had the opposite effect on me. I go out on my camera, take a few pictures of blue tits or magpies or whatever it be, and I'm chilled. But this hobby, because of the breeding seasons, although they might be for 6 months, they go in a flash. And if you mess up at this stage, you know, at the pairing up stage, you waste a lot of time until you realise you've messed up. And then before you know where you are, you're halfway through the breeding season, and you've got nowhere, and then you start to panic again, and so on. It's stressful. So yeah, we had a lot of. I probably could have had a lot more sex than I have had, thinking about it, if you tend to live for the Budgerigars. But I wouldn't swap the Budgerigars, to be fair.
Well, it's a good thing Jackie's so understanding anyway, but that was very candid, so thank you for sharing that.
Well, just saying, John, just on the subject of Jackie, bearing in mind we were partners in the Birds for a long time, I'd have never got where I were in the fantasy had it not been for Jackie. She backed me all the way. She backed me on everything I did, everything I said. She was a full partner in the Birds. She could sit at a club meeting and do a face-to-face with anyone and talk budget. So I'm proud of her for that.
But it's good you've done it together. My wife doesn't like the Birds, so I'm envious of you.
Yeah.
You're in it together. So just tell me. I mean, I've got so many questions to ask you. This could become a 3-part interview, but I shall try and be brief with some of them.
Sure.
So you've got your first bird, and obviously you've then got other birds, and you're breeding away, and you're a beginner at this point. Just very briefly, what was your first shed like? Could you just tell us what the dimensions were and how many breeding cages you had, please?
We bought a little cottage in a village that's only 1.5 miles from where we are now, called Newton Harcourt, and it had an outbuilding that was a toilet and a coal house. I'm sure anyone listening in will know what I'm talking about. And the wall got knocked out between the two, and that was my bird room at the time. We lived there for, I think, 4 years, and then moved into the same village to a large Victorian place that again had an outbuilding, a similar outbuilding, coal and toilet, coal house and toilet. That became my bird room. And then the house was virtually derelict. Every bit of plaster had fell off the walls, upstairs, downstairs. At one point, we had the toilet and the kitchen sink next to one another, so that was a bit embarrassing when Jack's cooking the steak and I needed the loo. But we got through that, and the first job we did was built a 28 by 10 purpose-built brick bird room for the birds. And then once they were settled, we concentrate on renovating the property. So yeah, you don't need a big all singing, all dancing shed, John. You need to have some common sense. Common sense will get you a long way. You need to listen to people, you need to trust people, and you need to not rush. And that would be my advice to anyone starting out. I know it's different now. It is different now. And I'd find it very difficult, I think, to start now. But I do believe that what I'm saying to you now would still stand anyone in good stead if they followed this sort of the line that we went down.
Fantastic. So when you moved into the house with the lavatory and the kitchen, and you obviously got your priorities spot on by building the bird room first.
Yeah.
How many breeding cages did that have in it? What stage were you at this point? Were you sort of novice or? Yeah,
novice. Yeah.
How many breeding cages did you have at that point?
Well, I could only get about 12 in, and a flight, to keep any chicks or spare birds in. It was early novice years when I built the 28 by 10 cages. So I would say that I might have been limited a bit, but I remember Dave Topless once said, there's two ways of doing this, really. I was fortunate enough to meet and be pally with Robbie Keeber. We've got a lot in common, me and Robbie. We never stop talking. We never have a fallout. We disagree with lots of things, particularly on football, because we're both massive Leicester City fans. But Robbie's one of them Leicester City fans that if a Leicester player fetched a centre forward down by the neck, it's not a foul. And if one of their forwards fetches our centre forward down, or their centre half fetches our forward down, and it's a 50-50 challenge, Robbie sees that as a leg breaker. So we do fall out about that, but nothing else. And we can travel. We drove to Lutos in Switzerland, there and back, and spent a couple of days in a hotel and never stopped talking. We have so much in common as far as the birds, football, fishing, you name it, and we never stopped for conversation. But I tied in with Robbie in the early days, and Robbie is probably known, he may disagree with this a little bit, but he will buy birds. It's not a bad thing, but he will look for birds anywhere, and he will travel the length and breadth of the country looking for birds. And of course, I thought that's what happened, and that's the way everybody did it. And we'd be in somebody's bird room at 1 o'clock in the morning when it's obvious to me that this guy wants rid of us, and Robbie's going nowhere until he gets what he wants. So, as I say, I thought that's the way it was done. And then having met Jeff Bowley, and he invited me to his place. And when I talked about respecting champions back in the day, we'd arranged to meet him at 8 o'clock. And we got to Hatton in Derbyshire at 7:30. I hate to be late for anything. Really annoys me when I'm late, and also when people are late when they're turning up to mine or whatever. But we sat in a car park down by the River Duff for 30 minutes so that we could get to Jeff's bang on time. Jeff will tell you that never invite a beginner to your place because you'll regret it for the rest of your life. It's become a standing joke, but Jeff and I are really good friends. We've been friends for over 35 years. We still, apart from the lockdown, we socially still see one another, go out for meals, etc. And he was a great calming influence on me, as was Dave Topless, who lived very close to Jeff. At the time, I would think in the late 80s, early 90s, Dave and Jeff were only a smidgen apart from quality. And I think that Dave Topless, who was become to be known as Mr. Budgerigar, only beat Jeff, or Jeff was on a par really, but for whatever reason it was at the time, and bearing in mind I'm looking back with a beginner's eye then, Dave always seemed to have the edge on Jeff, but they did it by selective breeding and thinking about your pairings and working on families, which was a completely different. Dave Topless said to me, and this will hold well with anyone of any section, I think. You have your breeding season, you sort your birds out, you depending on your cages, and this is where you don't need 30 cages as a beginner or a novice, or even as a champion in a lot of instances. Let's say we got 12 cages. Keep your 12 best cocks. You don't lose too many cocks over a breeding season, so maybe keep 2 or 3 spares. Work your best cocks, and then when you've got your chicks at the end, you're gonna sort them out and you're gonna grade them, and you're gonna keep your better ones again. This business about keeping the lesser ones. So, you know, when our pied won the club show, we never sold every pied as a relation to or an S-mate to Dude as he became known, because that's not the case. But what I'm trying to say is, you sort your level out. This is how Dave explained it to me. If your level's there this year, after the breeding season, you want your level to be there, which means you're moving up the ladder. If you keep lesser birds, it'll drag you down. So you cut back to your 15 best cocks and maybe your 20, 25 best hens max, I would think. And you hope that your level's going up. And he says, as you move through the sections and your level's coming up, you get into the intermediate and into the champion section. And that's when your level should be at a quality where these special birds pop out. So you're at this level now. The next year, hopefully you'll pop a best in show out and maybe another best in show. And then the following year, you just lift it that little bit more and out pop the special ones. And those special ones may be the one that wins the club show for you. And having that advice from Dave Topless, who won the club show in 1990 and 94, and Jeff Bowley won the club show in 95 with the cinnamon dark green, and Young Bird with the blue, and Young Bird again with a spangle in 2000 and something or other. You've got to listen to them people. And all I did, I just followed their advice, and it stood me in good stead. Simple as that, John.
So you just think, so you cull those cockbirds, you out as many as you can, getting down to the number, so you've got enough for your breeding cages, a few spare ones. I mean, would you use a hen that was a lesser bird but worked very well bred, or the same rules apply?
No, hens are slight. Hens are. Excuse me a minute, John. Can I just put a light on? I'm getting a bit dark.
Yeah, sure.
I've had a hard day. I felt I was going to nod off a bit there. No,
We don't want that.
hens we treat slightly different. But going back to the cocks for a minute, this only works if you're going to call your birds really hard, and that's what you need to do. I had a call from a champion one year, and he said, "Mick, would you come and help me sort my birds out?" I said, "Yeah." This guy had 53 breeding cages. I said, "How do you want me to sort these?" He said, "Will you sort them how you'd sort them?" I spent the day there. I come out there looking like the abominable snowman, white head to foot with dust and feathers. And I cut him back to just over 20 pairs and said I'd go with that. As the season went on, he went back to 53 pairs. So he'd obviously not wanted to follow my advice. I wanted to follow Dave and Jeff's advice because it worked for them and it was working for me. Going back to the hens, John, yes, we all know that hens are a different kettle of fish, and it's a difficult one because if you say the relation to your best hen is an absolute pet, I'd be hard pushed to use that. If that relation is maybe a decent novice bird, I'd keep it. So it's depending how you fixed at that time and what pieces of material you got available to you to continue your breed, or to continue a breeding season or to complete a breeding season. So you may have to use these lesser birds, and yes, they will work for an established stud. The downside to a beginner is when he goes and buys the pet shop type brother to his best cock and the pet shop hen sister to his best hen, he's likely to breed the lesser birds. It's like that. It's something that's always stuck in my mind. And Harry Bryan said this to me himself, and it's a well-known saying: "You won't breed rats from mice." And I can't tell you how many times when I'm pairing up that phrase comes into my mind. So it's one to carry with you if you can, because you know it brings it back to reality when you start to lose your way a little bit. And Harry Bryan will say, "You can't breed rats from mice, mate." And
do sorry, just cut across you there. Do top exhibition birds? I'm just trying to myth bust a bit. If you get two really good top exhibition budgies and put them together, can they still throw absolute rubbish?
well, they can, but they shouldn't.
They should, but they can.
Well, listen, to an outcross from Tom and one from Harry, and they're not related in any way, and you put them together, yes, they can. Okay. If, as the situation got with Ian and I, where we were sharing blood, they're not outcrosses as such. If I had birds from Jeff Bowley, as I have since I was a beginner, and Dave Topless, although very few because it was like getting blood out of a stone, those two birds could throw outstanding birds. And that's what you're trying to achieve with your own stud. You're trying to achieve a consistency. When you pair birds together, you're trying to achieve a consistency. There's your level. You'll throw 90% there and maybe 10% there. Well, obviously you want those to go, don't you? So you're going to keep. Yeah. So it's so simple a theory when you look at it like that. There's your level. Raise your level next year. Raise it the following year. Raise it as you're going up the sections. Get to the intermediate section. You're going to start throwing these special birds out. Yes, it can happen at beginner stages.
But you're keeping your. It sounds like you kept your bloodlines really tight. So there's, say, 3 or 4 very influential fanciers, which you've repeatedly visited, and on top of that, you're out in the bottom, best to best, best to best, best to best. But so the lines are close, but the outcrosses are close as well.
Yeah, that people are going to be surprised to hear this. That when I say I didn't bring an outcross in for 10 years, that is true. I was breeding. There was a time when Jackie and I had a fantastic stud of cinnamons, and we didn't want to mess them up. The problem with bringing a bird in, a complete outcross. When I say I didn't bring an outcross, I mean I didn't bring an outcross. I brought birds in as outcrosses that were related to our birds, bred from our birds with something else. But I never, and from studs I knew of, and not just Jeff and Dave, Robbie, and the Bloxhams and the Richmonds, you know, but we knew those studs and we knew what they were producing. And if you go and buy a complete outcross from someone, you don't know what's behind that bird. You don't know what it's going to do to your birds. Difficult. I wouldn't advise that. Not if you're trying to build that stud. I could probably go and do it now, and be able to work with it, but chances are it wouldn't give me what I wanted. To be fair, in a small stud, we're still a small stud. We're even a smaller stud now. Jackie and I've worked on 18 breeding cages this year. Last year it was less than that because I didn't think I had the quality to fill the cages, and I went out and bought a few. This is great. This is when you follow this sort of way of doing things, you make some really good friends. And I've got to the stage. I was close to packing in budgies over the last few years because we were getting a lot of problems with a fancier that was trying to make our lives a misery. We dealt with him through the courts, and but it took a lot out.
But it wasn't a nice time.
It was a really, really bad time. A lot of pressure, not really putting my efforts into the birds, worrying about court cases, what it was going to cost us, etc. As it happened,
did the birds slip back then, did they?
The birds slipped back. Yes, two reasons. One was this issue with a lot of stuff outside what I like doing in Budgerigars, which is breeding birds and talking about birds. And I was talking about things I didn't want to talk about within the hobby, a lot of negative stuff, a lot of nasty stuff. And it was getting me down. But we dealt with this guy. We came out on top. You know, we won the day. We got awarded a lot of money compensation. But it nearly broke me. And it nearly broke.
Did you have to make a conscious decision that this was either we're going to do this again or we're out? You sort of set. Was that where you were at? You thought? Yeah,
I got to the situation where Jackie's supported me all the way along this. Never once had a negative to say. Backed me all the way. She was telling me. She were asking me to pack in. Mick, she said to me one day. She said, Mick, the only hassle you get in your life comes from Budgerigars. And I thought about that, and she's right. There is nothing else that stresses me out, apart from worrying about the family, that they're going to be okay, than Budgerigars. And I have this passion. I still want to win the club show again. Ian wants to win the club show again. And I'm striving to do that now. It's that drive again to do that. It's probably but what I was going to say, John, this is where relationships you've made over the years can pay fruition. I went to see a guy I'd not seen for 20 years, and I rang him up and said, look, you got anything to go? I need to get some birds in that you know, I'm hanging in there with 8 or 9, 10 decent birds, and it's not quite enough. Can you help me out? It's just come down, let's see what we can do. I came away with a yellow-faced grey cock to die for. And I said to him, that's brilliant, mate. How much do you? He said, you don't owe me anything. I said, why? He said, well, after what you did for me all those years ago. You know, and that is great. That is what's nice about the hobby, and that's what's warming about the hobby. And that's what puts all the other nastiness, it buries it. And I've got my ambition back again. I hope you can see that, John, the way I'm talking, that
absolutely.
I'm passionate about the hobby. And I'm getting a bit fed up now because I've now got too many birds. I've been in lockdown long enough. My bird room now is only 19 by 10. And the birds are everywhere. And there's some quality in there. And, you know, I'm pleased. So it's been a great season. I want it to end now. I can end it, I know that, but I probably will soon. I'm probably going to have to soon. But yeah, so yeah, people will help you. You know, if you go out and spend loads of money and then you've got no money, you can't buy any birds. It's as simple as that. And I've never spent loads of money.
Well, that was the other thing. I mean, we do see a lot of fanciers asking a lot of money for birds, and also perhaps newbies into the hobby trying to race their way through, perhaps because they've got, not that there's anything necessarily wrong with that. They may have disposable income, and they may be, you know, what they want to they may have been in the birds before and want to catapult themselves back in and up to where they were previously. But does that still hold true for you? You think, well, I suppose at champion, if you know, there's going to be an element of cost if you're not swapping birds. But for newbies into the hobby, you still stand by that, do you? That you don't have to spend a lot of money to get on in this fancy.
I stand by that 100%. And for your first 3 years, keep your money in your pocket. Go and see it. Go and join your club. The breeders around you will help you. They will give you all the advice you need. You're no threat to them. Like Frank Harmer, he helped us out, not just with the one he sold us for a £5. Incidentally, we came back from Bowley's that night, all elated, and with the promise of going back, and he'd sorted some birds out. Walked in to the cottage, nice and warm with the Arga fire. There's Rocky in the corner. I said to Jackie, I'll just cover Rocky up. Don't want to disturb him. Covered him up, and he died of a heart attack. So
oh, no.
After having a great night, we, believe it or not, Jackie and I sat there holding hands, crying over a £5 pet budgie. So yeah, but no, keep your money in your pocket, because the fool and his money soon parted. And there are people within the hobby who will, there's plenty of people in the hobby that will sort your birds out for reasonable money at your status. But there are also others, and they're usually all over advertising everywhere. And they are the commercial breeders, and they were only too pleased to take the money. I'm not saying you won't get a decent bird, but you'll pay a lot more for it.
You'll pay a lot more.
Yeah. So my advice is, first 3 years especially, build relationships with people you get on with. You know, show them that you trust them, and let them learn to trust you. And you'll be amazed what you get. You'll be loaning birds, they'll be giving you birds, and that's the way. And then you have them to fall back on. And as you go through the hobby in the sections, you'll meet more and more people. Like in the novice section, we met Ian, and you know, and well, a lot of you will know what happened with the partnership, etc. So it has its pluses, but yeah, for God's sake, please keep your money in your pocket.
Okay.
So I mean, sorry, John, go back to the old adage that was about when I was a beginner: sell 10 to buy 1. So if you sell 10 for £7 and you got 70 quid, go and give the local champion or whatever down the road, give him 70 quid and ask him to find you a decent bird. That's the way to do it. Now, don't pick out your housekeeping money, because one it'll pay your missus off big style, and she will put pressure on you not to stay in the hobby. Let the hobby fund itself best you can.
Yeah, well, that's solid. That sounds like amazing advice. And yeah, I know it must be tempting for people when you go to places and you've perhaps got your, as you say, your housekeeping money in your pocket. Well, I've been there. It's tempting not to buy an outcross. So I think you do have to, like everything, you've got to live within your means. So.
Just before you go on there, John, there are some people who have the money, and you've got to remember that people come into this hobby in later life now when they retire. So they may be successful businessmen who want to go out and spend a lot of money. Well, that's not a problem, because, you know, they're not sort of at your stage, John, where you've still got a mortgage and you've got limited funds to go around. You would need to fund your hobby through the birds. They have the funds to go out and buy the best birds, but you can't buy the best birds. We find that champions, we could go to champions and say, oh, do you want to sell me that? No, I won't sell you, but I'll swap it. So we've got to sell one of our better birds to get one of their birds. And we would value our better birds higher than theirs, because we know what our better birds can produce. We don't know what that can produce. Do you understand what I'm saying? And
absolutely.
I had a 74-year-old beginner come to me and said, Mick, can you help me out? I'm 74, I'm just starting out. I want some good birds. And I said, I've not got a lot to go. I'll tell you what I've got. In that bottom cage, I got a pair of cinnamons. I've just split them up. They've had 3 rounds. These are the chicks they've bred. They've bred some really decent top cinnamons. They were getting on a bit. And I said, you can have those if you like, but give them both a rest. Give them a good rest. And I saw him a week or a fortnight later at our meeting nights, and had a bird doing. He said, yeah, I've paired the cock to a a yellow wing or a white wing. I can't remember. I thought, you know, anyway, as time went on, he said, Mick, I'm not very happy with those birds you sold me. I said, why? He said, every bird I've bred's a cinnamon. I don't like cinnamons. I said, they're a pair of cinnamons. They can't do anything else. So, you know, he might be 74 and he might have loads of money, but he ain't got the first idea of what a budgie could produce. So that's how a fool and his money can be parted, isn't it? I didn't charge him hardly anything. I think I charged him, I don't know, £100 for the pair, and they bred some cracking birds. But I don't mind about him losing his money. He's got plenty to lose. But I'd hate for a new beginner to come to me and get in a similar situation and be disappointed with what he'd had, you know, because it paid out of his housekeeping money.
Absolutely. Well, you're right. If guys, you know, if you've got plenty of money to spend and you want to spend it on the birds, then you're still living within your means, aren't you? So it's, and I think once you do, I imagine once you stretch yourself financially to get good birds in, and there's an awful lot of pressure. And I can imagine you'd almost guaranteed if you spent your mortgage money on the budget, it died before you got it home. So as would be Sod's law. Yeah. So just taking you back a bit, tell us about the champion section. So you've done your 10 years, you've got into champion, you've won a CC at this point, you've won some sections. So how did the champion section go? Was it a slow start or?
Well, we also won our first best in show at Northampton in the intermediate section with a light green cock. And that was a strange situation as well, because there was a guy that had been winning everywhere with a light green cock all around the country, and he needed one CC to make it a champion bird. And he walked in with it, and I said, "You bought your light green?" He said, "Yeah." I thought, "Oh, bugger." I said actually something a bit stronger than that, but so the birds get benched, and I'm looking around, and I look at his light green cock and think, and he's in the novice section. And I think that's a good bird, that. And then I went wandering around the champion section just to have a look. And on the top shelf, which was quite high, and the sun was beating through the room at Northampton. It's like a school with glass windows, and it was beating in. And I looked up and I saw this stunning light green cock that went on to win best in show. And it wasn't until it come down at normal level that I realised it were mine. And we'd won best in show that day. So that was our first best in show, which was a fantastic feeling. And I felt well earned. I'd got an idea that we had a chance. But then when this guy had not been beat with this light green cock and he turned up, I thought my stomach sank a bit. So even even someone just going in champion section can be concerned about the lower sections. You know, if they've got good birds, we know they've got good birds. It's not that we don't know about them. You can bet your life, I'm telling you, we know who's got the birds in the beginner section and in the novice section. But I remember at that time writing an article for the Budgerigar Society magazine. I think I entitled it "Our Trepidation of Going in up to the champion section," and it was with trepidation, because we were now in with the likes of Bowley Topless, Hallam's, even Harry was around at the time, but not a serious challenger, I don't think, at that time. Lots of big names in the Midlands at that time, and of course, when you went to the club show, you're in with everyone. So we entered our first show, and well, we entered our first 4 shows. We entered as champion. We had four best in shows with 4 different birds. So that proved to me that the hard work, the lack of sex, and the the dedication to build something to last had suddenly reached fruition. And I tell you now, I really felt chuffed that Jackie and I had achieved that at champion status and not at beginner novice status, because now we were getting credit for what we'd done. People were saying, well, they've always had good birds, you know, they've had that cinnamon line for years, you know. So we were getting the credit that we deserved. And we were winning at that same time, at them same shows, we'd probably win best op sex in show as well, you know. I think 2 out of the 4 we did. So yeah, and really, we never looked back. And I think every year since that year, and it's only recently when it didn't happen due to the problem, we've had a best in show at championship show level or higher since that day.
And what year was that we're talking about when you first when you went up to champion? Can you recall?
It would be, hold on,
You're getting the calculator out.
around about 98, I think, somewhere around there.
Fantastic. So, okay, so you've obviously not looked back from champion. We've touched on a little bit about outcrosses. So, obviously, you didn't bring an outcross in for a long time, and obviously, recently you've said you've brought a number of outcrosses in, but obviously there hasn't been, there's not loads of, maybe one or two each year. There's not a lot coming in at any one time. Can you tell us about some notable outcrosses? Perhaps, have you been further afield at any time?
Well, yeah, talking about the most noticeable outcross, that we bought was when I was in partnership with Ian. We decided that this would be a proper partnership, split down the middle. Everything we laid out on birds, we'd split down the middle. We'd never buy a bird for any substance money-wise without each of us seeing it and okaying it. So Ian had sourced an outcross with Bernard Kelly, who became, Ian was always a good friend of him, and I became a good friend with Bernard as time went on. Fantastic fancier. He's departed now, unfortunately, but really nice man, really genuine man. And Ian said, I've sourced an outcross, right? And anyone who knows me will know that I'm not a fan of spangles. And I said, what is it? He said, it's a spangle. I said, oh, Ian. I said, is it a good one? He said, yeah, it's a good one. I think you'll like it. Okay, where is it? Bernard's. Okay, so Manchester. Ian lives in Rochdale, which is 130 miles from me, 2 hours, something like that. So we went over, gets to Ian's, had a cup of tea, had a bit of breakfast, and we're talking about getting over to Bernard, and he said, I said it was spangle. I said, yeah. He said, there's something I've not told you. I said, what's that? He said, it's a double factor. I said, Ian, what are you doing to me? And I said, well, okay, let's go and have a look at it. Maybe it won't be what we want. But it was the most outstanding bird. That was the foundation of a lot of the birds in our partnership, not early on, but later on. And we had a cinnamon spangle that a lot of people think should have won the club show. We thought it stood a chance of winning the club show. It always got put down for the spots weren't brilliant. Well, the spots are there. It's a cinnamon. You don't see them. And God, how many spangles do you see with no spots that win best in show? And I'll tell you how bad Ian bred this spangle. And the Sunday before the club show, or the week leading up to the Sunday before the club show, he rang me and he said, I'm having trouble with the spangle. I said, what? He said, I don't know what to do to spot it out. I think the underspots are more prominent than the main spots. He said, will you come over? And all right, it's a 2-hour trip, so it's a 4-hour round trip. And I said, look, I can come over on Sunday, but I've got a family do on at lunchtime, so I can't hang about. So I left home, I think, at 7 o'clock, got to Ian for 9 o'clock, had a cup of tea, went in the bird room at 9:15, spotted out the spangle, and I think I hit the road at 9:45, and I'm back home at 9:45, 9:10, 12. So that's the dedication of wanting to get a bird on the bench to win, and what I consider to be the way partnerships should work. As a partner, Ian's quite capable of spotting that bird out. He just wanted a second opinion. And if you've got a bird in your hand that you think, and both of us have experienced this, remember, if you're spotting, beginners and novices think that spotting out is stressful. Imagine having a bird in your hand that you think has got a good chance of winning the club show, and you're spotting it out that week before the club show, and you know that one mistake, one little slip, and your ambition is possibly gone forever. That is stress. But yeah, so that bird played a massive part in our stud. There's a funnier story about when we went further abroad. I mean, those who are around at that time will know that Joe Manners was Mr. Budgerigar. I mean, Ian had been fortunate enough to get a spare seat in a car to go the year before with Kenny Fagan, I think, and Jeff Tuplin and one other, I can't think who it was. And he rang me, said, Mick, it's Budgie heaven. You got to come, you'll love it. I said, okay. And we'd agreed that if there was anything there that I trusted him to buy it. So I get a call on the way, he's on the way back. And I said, hi mate, how you going? He said, yeah, it's been good. I said, did we get out? He said, yeah. I said, what we got? He said, I got a cinnamon cock. I said, oh, nice. And then there's a lot of ruckus in the car. I'm hearing this noise. And I said, what's going off? He said, no, it's all right. I said, and I keep hearing him going, tell him, go on, tell him. I said, what are you doing? He said, well, it's an opaline cinnamon. Oh, Ian, we don't use opaline cocks. He said, I know, but, you know, it was a good bird. And I said, yeah, okay, don't worry about it. And then there's still more noise coming, and they're laughing, and they're winding him up, saying, tell him, go on, tell him. I said, what, Ian, what you got to tell me? He said, I don't think I can. I said, tell me. He said, it's a spangle. I said, so you bought an opaline spangle cock? I didn't mind the cinnamon bit. Oh, was it a cinnamon? No, it wasn't a cinnamon. Yeah, okay. You know, anyway, I said, I don't want it. We split the money, but you do what you do with it. So we decided that this was when we'd won the club show in 2008. I think we went in 2009, because as we walked in Joe Manny's bird room, he always had a pile of magazines, and right on top of the magazine was the 2008 magazine with the blue cock on the front cover. And Ian looks down and he said, that'll do for me, partner. I said, yeah, do for me, mate. And then we signed the iconic blackboard where everybody from all over the world has signed. And we'd gone with Kenny Fagan and Jeff Tuplin, and we're in there for ages, and we're not getting offered a bird. And I could see Ian getting more heated, and he said quite a few derogatory things about German people. And I said, oh, calm down. And all of a sudden, Joe Mans went, Mick, and he's got this. Was that a German accent? Mick. Anyway,
really?
Yeah, he'd got this bird in his hand, and he said, and he was naming these top breeders, so and so and so and so, so and so and so and so, so and so and so and so many euros to you, so and so. So I took it off him, and the first thing I thought, well, this is a little, excuse my language, people, a little fart. But I went into this room where he's got these show cages, and Kenny Fagan and Jeff were in there looking at some cobalt cocks that Kenny were looking to buy. And I put it in a show cage, and I said, oh, I'm not having that. And they said, you got to have it. I said, I've not got to have it. He said, yeah, have you got to have it? I said, why have I got to have it? He said, if you don't have that, you'll never get a feather off Joe again. I said, well, that suits me if this is what he's offering me. So I went back out and said, Joe, no good. This is my German accent again. No good. And he just snatched it out of my hand and threw it into the fly. And I thought, blimey. Yeah, going, that's it. You might as well go home now. Anyway, as time goes on, he offered me another bird. And it was a opaline. No, sorry. It was a yellow face. God, blimey. What was it? Yellow face cobalt, cinnamon cobalt. And I looked at it and I thought, well, it's got a face in it. It got gorgeous round spots, the roundest spots you'd ever see. And that was a feature we wanted anyway. But it weren't the biggest bird. And he went through the same old thing, so and so, so much, so and so, so much. So we had a look, and we had a chat and said, oh, maybe we'll take that. So, but before that, the only other place we could get a bird is groveling around in the in people who've been there will know he's got a sales cage as you go in. So there's Ian and myself, if you like, if you want to call it this, current world champions on our hands and knees trying to catch a bird that's running around with no flight and no tails, but had a fantastic face, a light green cock. I think that was 400 euros. Put that to one side, we might have that. Ian spotted a cinnamon hen that was, I think, 3 years old. And I said to him, well, that was prolapse when it lays its first egg, and I think that was 300 euros. I picked out a cracking young bird hen with a broken leg. So that night, I mean, anyone who knows Ian will find it's very difficult to make him smile, but I always used to be able to do it. And we laid in bed in the hotel, not together, I must add, single bed. So we're laying down.
I'm glad you got that in.
Yeah, we're not Morecambe and Wise. I said, let's reflect then, Ian. We're world champions, right? He went, yeah. I said, we've bought a grey-green cock with no flights and no tails. He went, yeah. I said, we bought a hen that's likely to prolapse when it lays its first egg. He went, yeah. I said, we bought a cripple with a broken leg, and we've paid quite a fortune for a little fart. And he is now in hysterics. He can't stop laughing. And then I milk that then. I love to see him laugh. It's great to see him laugh. And we had a fantastic time. But yeah, we came back and immediately give the grey-green away to Mick Freakley. He had that because we're not going to use a flightless, tailless bird. So we give it to Mick to trial it and see what happens. Well, it didn't work out. The hen that Ian liked, he paired it up and it prolapsed when it laid its first egg and died. The bird with the broken leg, well, it weren't broken leg, it was sort of gammy leg like this. Did actually breed, I had that and that bred. But the cock bird didn't stop breeding. The opaline cobalt never stopped, yellow-faced cobalt, never stopped breeding. But it didn't actually breed what we wanted. If anyone who's seen the Freakley and Ainley video will see it on there, and I'll say something about, you'll see the cock and you'll see the bird that we bred, and it was bigger than its dad, but it ain't got a lot of width, and we thought it was something we could move on with. And when I look back at that, I watched it. My neighbour found out we'd got one. Can I borrow it? And then she said, "Come and watch it with us." So we went and watched, and I looked at the birds and I thought that how they've changed, those type of birds. But anyway, we got on the gravy train where everyone else was going, and it didn't actually work for us. But it was a great experience, and we were successful, and we could fund that out of our sales bird, so it wasn't a problem. We're not selling bird, even though if I had a bird for £20 before we won the club show, it was £20 after we won the club show. We're hobbyists. We could have made a fortune and did, John. We love the hobby. But yeah, that was a good experience.
So just very quickly, I watched your FA1 DVD the other day, just ahead of this, because I've had it, I've enjoyed it before, and I thought, I'll dust this off again and watch it. I must admit, your birds 10 years ago are still far better than mine are now. So, but you can see how they've evolved. But even your birds back then were still tremendous. I know that perhaps the modern day budgie, the head has got wider, but your birds back then, I must say, they were beautiful. The feather was tight, lots of shoulder. They were brilliant. Even though it was amazingly 10 years ago now. So how did the partnership with Ian Ainley come about then? Because you've obviously mentioned it. For those who don't know, you were in partnership for how long, please?
Around about 10 years, yeah, a decade. We first met at Bodlewydden Castle in Wales at 1990 at a Budgerigar Society convention, I think. And Jeff Bowley and Ian had a relationship, and obviously Jeff had a relationship. So we decided we were all going to go, to meet to this convention, and we would be introduced to each other. We had a common interest that we got birds from the same people, and so we met. We hit it off straight away. I don't know why, because we chalk and cheese. I am the cheeky, loud one, and Ian's the straight-faced, quiet one. And we walked around and looked at the novice section. I looked at his birds and thought, he's got better birds than me. And then we got looking at my birds, or the mixture of the birds as we went round, and I think Ian had a similar feeling. We hit it off. We became great mates. We, although 130 mile apart, we visited regularly, stayed weekends at each other's house, and started to swap birds. And we swapped birds probably, let's have a think. Yeah, a good many years we swapped birds before the partnership. And the only downside to that, I'd go to him and say, what can I have then? He'd say, have what you want. He'd come down to me and what can I have then? You can have what you want. But we never took one another's better birds. It didn't feel right to do that. And then Ian said to me one day, he said, do you fancy going into partnership? And I said, I've thought about it for a bit, not too long. And I said, no, I don't think so. Why? He said, well, I thought it'd be good. I said, no. I said, look, Ian, I said, we're great mates. We get on well. I don't want the birds, because we both feel exactly the same way about the birds. We're so passionate, the both of us. We both saw birds the same way. I think that's why we hit it off. And I didn't want the birds coming between the friendship, because the wives and the kids and that all got on and so on. And then some time went by, I don't know how long, but he asked me again, and I said, no, Ian, no, let's leave it. He said, yeah, okay, I just thought I'd mention it again. And then there's not too far in the future, he rang me up and he said, all right, mate. I said, yeah. He said, I want you to do me a favour, if you will. I said, what's that? He says, would you have the birds? We're moving house. Would you have the birds? He said, I wouldn't trust anybody else. I said, yeah, of course I will. So he bought his stud down here and carried on what he was doing to move, I think, from Whitegates to this big 4-bedroom house. And I think while they were down here, it suddenly come in my mind, I wonder if this partnership would be a good thing or not. So I rang him up and I spoke to Jackie. She said, look, if you want to go for it, go for it. So I rang him up. I said, is the partnership still standing? He said, yeah, if you want to. I said, well, let's do it then. So we did. Then I could take his best bird, he could take my best bird, because what we were doing then, we were making pairings that were the best for the partnership, not just for us as individuals. And I remember George Booth calling in one day when he was coming from his place to go to the BS office, and I'd got 30 cinnamons caught up, both cocks and hens, in the triple breeder. And he said, wow, look at them cinnamons, Mick. He said, what are you doing with them? I said, they're going up to Ian. He said, what, all of them? I said, yeah. He said, there's not a bad bird in there. I said, no. And them 30 cinnamons went up to Ian, and I never gave it a second thought. And that's how we worked it. You know, Ian had good birds off me. I had good birds off Ian in return. In fact, he started the pied line, although it wasn't a pied hen from Ian that bred the Club Show winner. It was now this is where, it's interestingly, coming back to your point earlier on about getting lesser birds from people you know. We bought a hen from Harry for £100, I think, Harry Hockaday, a little small hen. I bought it back here, paired it up, and bred the pied Club Show winner. And so it can work. You know, it can work at this level. It can work. And that's how it came about, John. And as I say, we've been friends ever since. We're still friends to this day.
But there's obviously a supreme amount of trust in there. I imagine if that trust wasn't there, or you both weren't as committed, that perhaps it wouldn't have been as successful. Would you agree with that?
Definitely. I think, again, if you watch the DVD, you'll see a situation where we're suited up, because we've been presented and that, and we sat in the photography room, I think. And the guy who made the video said, Mick, can you spare me 10 minutes? I went in and he asked me these questions. And then he said the same to Ian, and he asked him the questions. And neither of us knew this bit of filming were happening to the other one. So he basically asked me the question, he asked Ian the same question, and he flips from one to the other. And if you watch it, it'll say, how did the partnership come about? And I'll tell a bit, and then it'll flick to Ian, and he tells, and everything, nothing conflicts. Everything is, it's the same. We're both telling an identical story, and I was quite proud of that bit. And Ian says then, and got quite emotional at the time. He stumbled his words a bit, and you could see a few tears coming. He said, we trust one another completely, and that's how it works, you know.
Fantastic. And assume I assume you were both independently successful. So once you got into partnership, did the successes, did they sort of skyrocket at that point? You went to a different level again, sort of immediately, or was that, did that take a while, or was the studs integrated?
It was immediately, John. We would always show together, even though we were under 30 mile apart. See, you got to remember, it was a social thing as well. You know, we'd take the kids to the shows, and we'd meet up, and we'd have meals and things like that. So it was no problem me to drive to Hull to show there, or to wherever, and he would come down here, or whatever. And yeah, and we had tremendous success, and to the extent, I mean, I know I'm loud and I'm brash, but I am quite a timid guy inside, and people who know me will know that. And we would walk into shows, and there'd be people just walking out having benched the birds and said, "Oh, I wouldn't have bothered coming if I know you were coming today." And I found that quite embarrassing. You know, it's something I found difficult to handle. I can't handle praise very well either, and that sort of thing. But yes, we cleared up, John. I mean, we went to Hull. We won all 4 majors. You know, we were sort of winning everywhere we went for quite a period of time. You know.
Did you think you were getting closer to the club show at that point, or did you think, oh, we're in with a shout here? The birds were getting better. You're at the top of your game. Did you think that, or sort of leading up to 2007 and 8?
Yeah, I think individually we thought it, but we never spoke it. And we would spend hours on the phone. Ian would ring me, and he'd say, "You got out, mate?" I'd say, "No." "So you got out?" "No." "Meaning for the club show?" "No." And Ian, the bird that Ian bred, the blue cock that won, missed the young bird ring by 5 days. So we had to show it in the adult class, and it went on to win best in show. Tremendous budget. The only one award that we've still to win is best young bird at show. We've took all the other 3. So that's yeah, I'd love to win the club show with a young bird, and I'm sure Ian would. You know, I know it won't be as partners now, but I think we'd each be the first to congratulate the other. But yeah, I think we did, John. And let's say Ian won in 2000. Well, we won in 2007, and at that point, you know, I never felt any less of that. Any of that success should have been more of Ian's than mine, because this was a combined stud and a combined effort. I felt just as much a part of that, of winning that year, as Ian did. And then when the boot was on the other foot and we won it the following year with the bird that I bred, I think Ian felt exactly the same. So it was a true partnership. It was sweet. It was dead sweet. It was just something that happened and was fantastic. And you know, yeah, still got very, very fond memories of it now. And the greatest thing was when my daughter and granddaughter came up to watch the DVD when it first came out. They were both crying at the end, because it's quite emotional, isn't it, when we're following that path to try and win our 3rd successive club show. And then yes, my grandson, who's grown up, come up, put his arms around to me and said, "I'm proud of you, Granddad." You know, and that's what more reward do you want than that? It was brilliant.
No, fantastic. And I know, knowing you as I do now, you've immersed yourself in the kind of social side of the hobby. Personally, I don't think everybody does. What are the? I mean, you've mentioned lots of names, and you talked about all your trips. How rewarding has that been, sort of really embracing the social side of the hobby? And would you recommend that to people coming into it to make the most of that side of it?
I think it's a must. You cannot get anything out of the Budgerigar hobby solely from Facebook. You've got to immerse yourself in it. I mean, we've judged, I wouldn't say all over the world, but we've judged extensively abroad, the continent a lot. America was amazing. We have an open invitation. Jackie and I, the only stipulation is if we go, we got to take the kids. We can go and stay in a property on Long Beach for free for as long as we want. And, you know, that's come from judging Budgerigar and fantastic relationships. We judged the Swiss national. I mean, we had a fantastic time there with Rick Watts, Ian, myself, and it's funny. You sit down at night on a Friday night and you're given a pile of cards like this and you've got to sign them. These are all, you know, and you're having a meal and you're signing these cards and challenge certificates or whatever. And then the drop on is that, oh, by the way, Mick, you and Ian have a subsidiary judge. What do you mean? You got to test the subsidiary judge. On what basis? We don't know nothing about your tests or whatever. Well, the problem is we've not got enough judges. And if you fail these, we've not got enough judges for next year's show season. So I've got a guy who can't speak a word of English, and I was lucky that he was a Swiss guy, and lucky that the chief steward spoke fluent English. Ian's got a guy from Belgium. God knows how all this works, and I'm sort of judging this class, and I can hear Ian going, "This is now my Belgian accent. I like the directional feather, yeah." And he's going on in this way, and I'm looking over, and I am actually weighing myself, thinking, "What's going on for him?" I said, "Ian." I said, "What makes you think that a Belgian guy can understand what you're saying in English just because you're trying to put on a Belgian accent?" Well, he burst out laughing. That cracked him up, you know. And then with the Swiss guy, it came to Daniel Lutoff's light green cock, which had apparently won at Colruy's the week before. I didn't know this. So I've got two cracking light green cocks, and I learned later that the one I put in second place was Daniel Lutoff. So bear in mind, I think I give him 4 CCs out of the birds I had to judge prior to that. So I went for the one that had won at Colruy's, not knowing that he'd won there that year at that time. And then I said to the chief steward, "Can you just convey to the steward that I'm going for this one on the day because I think it's slightly the better show bird, but if you ask me which bird I want to take home, it's the second place one." So he then came back and said the steward would take second place one. So, and we had been conversing in sign language, you know, like thumbs up, thumbs down, and things like that, and you know, and I got the steward and I bent him over like that, kicked him up the backside, and this is how fun and comedy can work regardless of the language. We just all had a great time, and things like that made it better, you know. It was fantastic. But Daniel came in, "You're not like my light green." This is me with my Swiss accent there. "You're not like my light green." "Yeah, I like your light green." "You'll not put it first." I said, "I know, but I like your light green." And if he mentioned it once that day and that evening, he must have mentioned it 100 times, to the extent he really got on my nerves. But yeah, great. Judging abroad, judging full stop, John, is fantastic. And if you've got any inclination, anyone listening now, got any fears about judging, please go for it. I had a fantastic 9, you do 9 subsidiary tests throughout 3 years. And I think in I don't know if it was the first year or the second year, I could have packed in judging. I got with a lady judge who will remain nameless. I had to drive down to Worcester, which was 100 miles. Everything I put up, she put down. I lost my nerve completely that day. If I could have walked out that show hall, John, without embarrassing myself, I wanted the floor to open up and just get me out of it. I wanted to drive home. And Stevie, Ron and Steve Amos was watching all this, and he came up behind me and he whispered in my ear, "Mick, take no notice, it's a woman thing." So he sort of helped me a little bit. But honestly, John, I loved the other 8 assessments. This one, I could have died. And the strange thing about that is, when she sent the report in, she gave me a glowing reference. I just couldn't understand it. But you go through things like that. But if you've got any inclination to go and be a judge, go and do it. It's fantastic. great camaraderie.
And it's opened up lots of travel opportunities for you. And
Of course,
where have you been? Tell us where you've been quickly. Which countries have you travelled to judge?
Well, I've been asked to judge in Australia. I've been asked to judge in South Africa. I've been asked to judge in America, all on the continent. I've turned down Pakistan on a number of occasions because I just I'd feel uncomfortable. It's too much of a culture shock, I think, for me. But the people who go, I know they treat you like a lord, and they all have a great time. It's just something a step too far, I think, for me. But I've now got not a fear of flying, but I don't want to fly anymore. I've not flew for quite some time now, and I've turned down a lot of judging engagements over the last 5 or 6 years because of that. But it will open up the world to you. You know, if you make a name in some way or another, it doesn't have to be with Budgerigar. You know, some judges or some people who are traveling the world judging have never had fantastic success on the show bench, but they're good judges. You know, it's like the likes of Mourinho, who's a top football coach, who was never a top footballer. And I think Jurgen Klopp was similar. You know, you don't have to be a top Budgerigar to be a good judge. Just go out and do it. Go and experience everything that this hobby will open up for you, because you must do it. It's brilliant, John, honestly.
So, just very quickly, what does it feel like to win the club show? Were you nervous when they're doing that last bit? Did you know, or were you? Yeah, I'm trying to think of a better an apt phrase, considering we're telecasting this to the world. But what was your stomach doing at the time?
Well, I'll give you 2 instances. In 2007, the first year with the Blue Cot, we were like quivering wrecks. If we weren't holding hands, we weren't far off holding hands, trying to support one another. And yeah, eventually we got the result. And I think, well, I mean, we just had a big hug, and all the emotions came out. It was a culmination of what we'd spent a decade trying to achieve, and a lifetime in Budgies really trying to achieve. And I just remember, if anyone asked me how does it feel, it was just a very, very warm feeling, a warm, satisfying feeling, if that makes sense. The second year, this was funny because I never told Ian that I thought the Pied had a chance. And he rang and he said, "How's it looking? Have we got out?" I said, "No, nothing down here, mate. What about you?" "No, I don't think so." But I had an inkling that the Pied stood a chance, and oh, blimey. Eric Peake was the judge, and he'd been involved in a car accident that year, and quite badly with a bad head injury. And people were saying that he was struggling and he might have to pull out and so and so. So, you know, I do the photos at the club show, and on a Saturday morning, once I'm set up, there's not a lot to do, just waiting for the birds. And so I take some general shots to supply to the magazine, etc. And I walked by Eric and said, "Oh, as he was judging," and I just went, "Hello, Eric. Nice to see you, mate. I'm glad to see you looking good." And he went, "Oh, hello, Jeff." And I thought, "Oh, that's a bad sign." Because he knows me well and I know him well. And then I was getting feedback as I was walking around. "Eric's got you pied in 7th place." I said, "Oh, blimey." I said, "All right, thanks." And I don't like to watch the judging, if I'm honest with you. Excuse me. Well, eventually he moved it up and he put it 1st place. And it went on and won Best in Show. And he gave it a glowing reference, this bird. And when that bird won, or as it was being judged, it was between myself and ourselves and Brian Sweetin, who got a bird in Best Young Bird. I think it was a grey green cock. And he's a big lad with massive hands. And he came up to me and he held his hand out and he shook my hand and he said, and he squeezed it and he pulled me towards him like this. And he said, "Down to me and you now, mate." And I just lost it. I was a quivering wreck at that minute. And I remember going and sitting on the BS stand, and Marston Nee, one of the security guys there, a BS member, who only had one eye, we used to call him Odd Eye. He knew that Odd Eye. he came walking towards me and sort of went like that. And I looked up and I went like that. And he got close. I said, if you're kidding me, I'm going to kill you. And he went, and then I heard the announcement that Best in Show winners Freakley and Ainley. And incredible. To do it 2 years running is amazing. To do it once, it's everyone's ambition. To do it twice, we were in with a select few, and it was amazing.
Well, to be fair, so many fanciers don't win the club show. So many good fanciers don't win the club show. So I can imagine, there's no disgrace in not winning the club show, but to win it, I mean, it must be amazing. So, well, thank you.
Oh, sorry, John, go on.
No, I was going to say thank you. Thanks for sort of sharing your thoughts on that. But conscious of the time, so just very briefly, obviously you came out of the partnership with Ian. What were the reasons for that? Can I ask? Did you? Am I able to ask that?
Yeah, of course you are. Yeah, Freakley and Ainley, I had nothing, never have. The situation was that I retired, took early retirement. Ian had grandchildren around the same time. His business was failing, and I think he lost the business in the end. Started another business subsequently, but so our situation's changed completely. I, as you know, love wildlife photography. I remember standing as an apprentice electrician outside the place I was going to work on my 15th birthday when I started, thinking to myself, I've got 50 years of this. And when I look back, I think I was ready to retire then. So I took early retirement. As a normal working guy, I was priding myself that I could retire early and was financially okay, and that sort of thing. And when I got up, people say it took them ages to sort of get into retirement. I was up and at it from day one. I've never carried a wallet, and I've never worn a watch from the day I retired, which is now, I think, 11 years ago, something like that. Jackie would not see me because I'd be gone out before she got up and probably come back when she'd gone bed. I was out photographing everything I could find in the wild and lying under hedges and God knows what, and loved it. And of course, then I got to thinking, if I do anything, I have to do it 100% to the best of my ability. And I felt that the birds weren't getting the attention that I used to do. I mean, for God's sake, we started having sex again, so that'll tell you that what the situation was. And I didn't want to let Ian down. I really didn't want to let Ian down at all. If I'm going to be a partner, I've got to be 100% in that partnership. I don't want to be a sleeping partner or whatever. So it was nagging at me. It was nagging at me for ages. And our situation changed that we couldn't get together as often as we did because, if it's a toss-up between Ian seeing me or seeing his newly born grandchild, he's going to do that at the weekends. And so it completely changed. The word that went round the fancy was that we'd had a massive fallout, and totally nothing like that at all. Our circumstances changed. I said to Ian, if you want to pack the partnership in, I sort of paved the way. No, why would I want to do that? And I wanted him to say yes, and he didn't. And then I think at another time I had approached him again, and I think again he said no. And then I sort of forced his hand a little bit, and he said, well, let me have a word with Scott, because you got to remember that Scott became a big player in the partnership as he got older. And according to Ian, Scott was quite emotional when he suggested that to him. But they'd had a long conversation and thought maybe overall it was the right thing to do. He rang me back and said, reluctantly, we think it's perhaps the best thing to do. And really that was a relief to me, because I'd only got myself to worry about then as far as the birds were concerned, and not Ian and Scott. So yeah, that's all there was in it, John. There's no more, we're still friends. The circumstances changed. It's as simple as that.
Fair enough. So hugely amicable. In terms of record keeping, how important is good record keeping with your birds?
Jeff Bowley and Vicky Hickling will be absolutely peeing themselves for laughing at that. Why did you ask me that?
Why?
Yeah.
I haven't been prompted. Only that was my own question, honestly.
I am not the best record keeper. I used to be, because I could keep it all in here.
Yeah.
It was never a problem. And in those days, when I was in a routine, if you're in a routine when you get up in the morning, you go in your birds, you go to work, you come back at lunchtime, you go in your birds, you have some lunch, you go to work, you come back at lunchtime, you go in your birds, feed your bird, and you have a couple of hours in the birds at night. Everything gets done. I'm in a routine. As soon as I retire and I come out of routine, I do things as and when. And I'm always, my days are, even leading up to this talk, and I'm trying to think what I might say. And there's no point me thinking what I might say because it just comes straight out of my mouth. So it's been on my mind this week, and I've had that many things to do, and I keep thinking I must sit down and try and sort of get some format of what I'm going to do here or what I'm going to say, but I just never had the time, and it's just how I am. So I've lost the question. What was the question?
Is keeping records important? How key is it to
Yeah,
success?
it's important, but I'm not very good at it. Let's put it like that.
Well, that was very honest. Okay. Yeah. What's the hardest feature to add into a top exhibition budgerigar?
I think I would have to go with back school. There's not a lot of birds carrying back school now, and I don't think there ever has been, in my opinion. Other breeders will differ with that, I'm sure, but back school I think is one of the hardest things. Or yeah, I would say back school.
Okay, and hardest feature to retain? Are you going to say back school again, or is
I am going to say back school. Yeah, I'm going to say back school, but I think all features you need to retain. Some are harder than others, and width of face, you can soon lose that, and we do need that. We need that width of face and the back school, definitely.
Okay. Do we need a bigger show cage?
Just going on from that, the easiest thing the easiest thing to lose is depth of mask, and one of my pet hates is short masks, and there's a couple of top breeders who I've visited over the years and pointed out to them that maybe they ought to concentrate on the mask a bit more. And I know that they've sort of looked at me as if to say, well, they weren't very happy that I pointed out to them. But one very top breeder rang me a week later and said, Mick, I've got to thank you. You're right, we'd not noticed it. Well, it's a pet hate for me, so I'm going to notice it. And the masks were creeping up. And so depth of mask I think is the easiest thing to lose. It's not a difficult one to get, but it's the easiest thing to lose. Sorry, John, carry on.
That's all right. So do we need a bigger show cage? Now the birds have got bigger over the last, and continue to do so. Do we need a bigger show cage? I'm not going to say plastic show cage, but I'm going to say, do we need a bigger show cage?
Well, we need a Tresper show cage, no doubt about that. Are you trying to be controversial now with this larger show cage?
No. I'm trying not to be controversial because I'm not going to ask you about plastic show cages for that very reason. But do we need a bigger show cage?
I think the show situation needs a complete overhaul. I don't know what it is. Yes, I could say we need a bigger show cage. Listen, if you think we've had the same cage since, is it 1926?
Yeah.
It's a bloody long time to have the same show cage. And I would say we probably do need to look at the show cage, whether we need a bigger one. It certainly needs, I think, some modification. And it certainly needs to be made out of a different material to what we're making them out of now, without any shadow of a doubt. And I would urge everybody when voting comes around, I mean, the BS solicitor does this, so I don't see it's a problem me telling people that what my thoughts are. Let's vote for a new show cage, lads, please. I've thought about the show season for a long time, and in recent years I've been muting an idea on the EBF forum, and if anyone's asked me personally what shows that clubs are failing now. We're all getting older, you know. People are dying. I mean, it's so inconsiderate. You're going to die and leave the hobby, but that's what's happening. And listen, I'm 71 this year, and Jackie will laugh at that because I start telling people my age since I turned 70. But what I'm trying to say, I still consider myself to be a youngster in the hobby, but I'm 71, and clubs are failing. Our own club is hanging on by a thread now, and I can see if we're not careful, we could lose that. I have muted an idea, and I know there's a lot of work to be done for this to become a reality. How many times do you hear there's too many shows? How many times do you hear that the quality at the show is poor? How many times do you hear that the classes are full of birds that don't deserve to win shows or whatever may be? I'd move to this idea of maybe having 10 mini club shows a year, where all the 10 area societies could amalgamate with the clubs around them to form. They can still keep their own individual clubs and have their own individual meetings, but come showtime, we'll all put on a big show, which means that you've got more helpers, because there might be 6 or 7 clubs around your area where 6 or 7 clubs can come together with the few working exhibitors that they've got, who can put on a good show. So 10 area shows. You don't have to show at all area shows. You can show up 1 show, 2 shows, or whatever. I'd do LEA, I would probably do South Midlands, and I'd do MBA. So they would be my 3 shows, mini club shows. So let's get back to having 1,000 birds at a show. I mean, there were 2,000 birds at a championship show when I first came into the hobby. Now we're getting birds. You're hanging on to sort of 300 birds to get silver. And 1 year in the past 3 years, I think, Leicester Budgerigar Society fell below the 300 birds. Let's have 10 area shows, 10 mini club shows, culminating with the club show at the end of the year. We got 11 top class shows where quality could come back together, where we could show against proper competition. And I don't want to hark back and say like the good old days, because I remember sitting in Monty Stradlin's house with Robbie Keeber and Arthur Bracey, and they were saying the hobby's not what it was nowadays. In our days, and I'm thinking, hold on, I'm going to my budget meeting, and if you don't get there for 7:30, you don't get a seat. We used to get 100 members at every show, and we had two shows a week. A month. The hobby's still good, but it needs revision. We can't continue with a showcase that was made in 1926, when we can all see how the birds are moved. As much as we don't like the new birds, and I'm sick and tired of hearing these big horrible things, because when I was coming through the hobby, they were talking about big horrible things then, birds that couldn't fly and can't see. We're still having the same thing thrown at us. Give the breeders of today the opportunity to refine what we've got at the moment and turn out these showbirds. There's some stunning showbirds out of this new, whatever you want to call it a mutation, call it a new feather, call it a new long tail, or whatever you want to call it. It's new material to use, and it takes time. We're not talking about evolution. We're talking about man's intervention to produce something. Give us time, give the top breeders time to turn this into something that we're all going to enjoy. And when we do it, give it a cage that's going to do it justice.
Okay, so I mean, that seems to make a lot of sense. I mean, I'm always conscious that all the shows are right across the summer as well, when perhaps people want to be out with their families. So I'd be up for pooling resources and having fewer but bigger shows. If you get a sick bird, very briefly, if you can, what's your sick bird procedure, please?
But the first thing is obviously to isolate it from your other birds if you can. I would certainly recommend a heated platform. It's well documented on the EBF. I use a homebrew kit platform. It's about this thick, and they give a gentle heat. The birds could sit on the floor. I mean, I even took the bottom out of the showcase so that sick birds could sit directly on the warmth. It don't get hot. It's not going to dehydrate a bird like these purpose-built hospital cages could do. The bird can then, if it's feeling better, it's either crawl up the wire and sit on the perch where it can get away from the heat as it starts to feel a bit better, that type of thing. This business about bringing them in and putting them on the radiator, to me, is a no-no, because you bring them in the house in the winter, put on the radiator, and you keep it nice and warm. You go to bed, your heating goes off, this bird's freezing but it's using all its energy to keep warm, not to live. It's using its energy to keep warm. I'm not a great believer of treating sick birds with medication. I've not got a set procedure. I treat each bird individually, what I think might happen, but I would say that 9 times out of 10, I'm not successful. And if you are successful bringing them round, it's a fair bet that when you pair them up and they're under pressure again, they're going to go sick again. So I don't know, John. I find it difficult to give any good advice on that question, to be honest.
Okay, so just tell us a bit about your photography at the club show. I think you've done 25. Is this your 26th year of doing the photos?
Well, I've certainly done 25 consecutive years at the club show. I don't know whether I'll be doing the 26 because it's muted that the BS want to change how they're going to take the photographs. And I have been asked to source a good way of taking pictures through the bars. And I'm afraid it's not something I feel I could put my name to. I hope dearly that they change their mind. I know they're fed up with me because I'm always moaning and I'm under pressure. And you don't know the pressure I'm under to produce top quality images for the world. It's not just for our magazine. The world get to see these. In our early days before digital, Jackie and I would be so stressed out. Our conversation driving back from Doncaster to Leicestershire would be along the lines of, what can we say if all the films turn out, all the photos turn out like that? Oh, sorry, that black. Because we're talking about slides. We've got no leeway with them. If you're overexposed, you're overexposed. If you're underexposed, you're underexposed. There's nothing you can do about that. And if my settings were wrong, and bear in mind, I'm not a professional photographer. We could say we stopped off at a motorway to use the toilets and the car got broken into and all the gear got stolen. We thought about, we got mugged, and we were under so much pressure. Thankfully, every time they were okay. I'm stressed out at the club show because I've got a limited time to take all the birds. I think I am asked to do 70 birds in a show cage. And I know that some breeders get quite upset or not too happy when they see their bird not as they have seen it when it's sat in their aviary in their flight with its mates, chirping away, blowing its head and looking fantastic. And it's been there since Friday night. It's probably travelled God knows how long to get there. It's been banged around on staging on Friday night and on trolleys. Saturday morning, it's doing the same again. It's getting banged on trolleys, banged on staging, and so on. Judges are poking at it and checking rings and everything else. Then they come to me. And I've got to get a picture of that bird looking how that bloke sees it in his bird room. But I do my best.
Well, it's hardly the best subject ever, is it? It's they're not exactly they don't do as they're told, do they? Unfortunately.
No, kids and animals, I suppose. But yeah, it's something I'm very proud of. It's something that I do get great pride from. The fact that I can say I've held every club show winner for the past 25 years. I've photographed every club show winner for the past 25 years. I've held virtually every CC winner for the past 25 years. I don't think there's anyone in the world who can say that. Well, there isn't, is there?
No.
So I'm proud of that. I hope the BS don't go down this route because I don't know how long I can go on with this, and I don't know whether I want to keep putting myself under that stress again. And, no matter what position you hold it within the hobby, at some point you're going to go. If I drop dead tomorrow, they'll get someone else to do the photographs. It's as simple as that. I'd like to continue, I think, at this moment, but it depends what decisions they make. We'll have to talk about that. But yeah,
but you've loved it anyway. You've enjoyed doing it, although it's a labour of love.
I've loved it. I've took great pride from it, John. Yeah, and it's fantastic.
So just moving on, influences breeder-wise. You've mentioned Dave Topless. So who's just in a sort of 30-second list? Who have been your real influences in the hobby?
I think Robbie Keever played a part. Still plays a part. I think me and Robbie are pretty close. Certainly Jeff Bowley. Over a long period of time, has been a good influence, and of course Dave for a lot shorter period of time. It's a shame Dave left the hobby because he was a fantastic guy, and lots of people have influenced me. I remember going to the Halloms and the Pilkingtons. There's a story you might enjoy here. Just going on about breeders and the photography. I went as a beginner on an aviary visit with Leicester to the Pilkingtons, Claire and Terry Pilkington, who everyone knows. And I was in awe of him and his birds and so on. And I looked above the door as we came in, and he got some A4 size photographs with a black background with these cinnamons, like whites, grey cinnamons with lovely white heads. And I thought, oh my God. And I was just getting into photography then, because photography was part of my record keeping at the time. I wanted pictures of the birds as I was going through the sections, you see. So, like, doing everything correctly or as best I can, I would taking pictures I weren't happy with, and then I would go down to the camera shop and I would driving them daft, and eventually got to the system I've got now. But I remember as an early beginner standing with the top champions from Leicester with Terry Pilkington hanging on to his every word. And then when I had the opportunity to say to him, I said, Terry, how do you get pictures like that? And he looked down at me and said, you will never be able to take a picture like that. Well, if anything's going to drive me on, it's that challenge to do so. So I'd like to thank Terry Pilkington now for getting me in the position I'm in as far as taking budgie pictures is concerned. Thanks, mate.
Excellent. So go on. Who are the influences? Who are they?
It's going to be. It's going to be mainly. It's going to be Dave Topless. It's going to be Jeff Bowley, and Bernard Kellett was a good influence. I think there's a number of people, and I don't want to leave any out, but there's a number of people where they gave great advice. They had great birds, and they were very nice people as well. And that's, if you can find those people while you're coming through the ranks, you can't want better than that.
Absolutely. Just, do you supplement your birds in the water, or do you just give them fresh water and put all the supplements in the soft food, for instance?
Well, you'll know, John, as you go through the hobby, you'll change. I am quite consistent. I mean, I've made 40,000 posts on the EBS forum, and the one thing you can say I'm consistent, because I know full well if I'm not, someone would tell me when I've said the opposite today as what I said yesterday or 5 years ago or even 10 years ago, and no one's picked me up, and I know they want to. So I know that I'm pretty consistent with what I say, but you do change your systems as you go on and as you get more experience. I always thought put the supplements in the water because the birds have got to drink water, and I can guarantee that they're taking it. That was my thought. In later years and in recent years, it was proved even as a well-established champion, you can get new ideas. The other option was to put it on your soft food. Well, soft food throw a lot of soft food away, but as Malcolm Green pointed out to me, how much water do you throw away? So if that's my drinker and I fill that to the top, when I throw that away, and it's got the additives in, when I throw that away tomorrow, I'm throwing that much water away because I've only drank that bit. And then also, you will find that if you put stuff in the water, it can taint the water. It can make it taste differently to the birds. And if you're given a soft food as well, they don't need that water. They'll get their moisture out of the soft food. So the times you're putting your stuff in the water, they're probably not drinking it. So in latter years, I put it on the soft food because what I'm finding, if I use a mix of fresh vegetables, mainly fresh vegetable, I don't use a proprietary egg food. I don't use egg. I use any vegetables that Jackie's got in the freezer. She buys in the fridge. She buys vegetables for me to give to the birds. You know, swede and peppers and you name it, celery, anything. They'll love anything like that. Beetroot, of course, and I put my supplements in a powder form on there because majority of the bird, I think I've got one bird in that shed that don't eat soft food, but the majority will. I know they're eating the soft food, and I'm not throwing away as much supplementation that's in the water. And they eat soft food, so they must be getting it. It's actually on the soft food. And of course, as you know, John, and you might even ask me about this, I now soak wheat, which is a big part. I give soaked wheat pretty much every day. Sometimes just soaked wheat, and sometimes soaked wheat in the vegetable mix. Soaked wheat is brilliant for. I'll use a bird care company probiotic and I use their daily essentials, which is like an orange powder. You can actually see it going on to the soft food, and when you mix it, you know they're going to eat it. So I've gone from water for years onto soft food now, John.
Okay. Oh well, thank you for that. That's good to know, and it's interesting how, as you say, people do evolve their way of doing things, even at the top level. And I mean, how much wheat are you giving your birds? Is that a little each day, or are they really taking it quite readily? The soaked wheat, the sprouted wheat.
I don't think it matters how much I give it to them; they'll eat it. I never find one piece of wasted wheat. But I've got the little square tower soaker, if you know what I mean. What are they, about 6 inches square?
Yeah.
About so deep. And I will half fill one of those. It swells, obviously, and I just keep it coming like a conveyor belt of it, and I soak it for 12 hours, 24 hours. I'm not fussed. I'll rinse it the next day, and then I'll drain it, and then it'll be ready. It'll be sprouted. And wheat germ is good for fertility, as you know. For years, breeders have been buying wheat germ oil, and quite expensive it is. Well, this is the wheat germ. When that first chits, when you see that seed start to chit, that's when the wheat germ is the strongest, I'm told. And it seems in the breeding season a good time to give wheat germ. So that's what I do.
I suppose if the birds are taking it readily, then you're doing something right. I suppose that's they'll soon tell you if they don't like it, or it's doing them some harm. Just very quickly, what's the youngest you would use a cockbird to breed with?
Yeah, that is an interesting one, and it's not the easiest one to answer, because it's about knowing your birds. But now with the technique we have of testing whether birds are producing sperm, there's no point doing it if it's not. So if it's too young to be producing sperm, you won't even consider it. If a bird's producing sperm, to me that says to me this bird could breed, and sadly enough, Exhibition Budgerigars don't live long. I mean, as we all know, and we've got a limited time for varying reasons where we can get the best out of them. And when you're trying to compete at the top level, you need to make the best of your cockbirds, well, all your birds. So to answer your question, I would possibly say to experienced breeders, I'd be using them at 6 months. If a beginner asked me, I'd be a bit more conservative and say to him, look, I think you should be looking around about 8-9 months. The older breeders would say, don't put them down till they're 12 months old. Well, I think you've missed quite a bit of an opportunity at 12 months old. So I would say 6 months, John, for the cockbird.
Okay. And what about hens? Do you always wait till they get to a year before you use them, even if perhaps they appear to be fit and ready to breed?
Never wait for a year. I never wait for a year, John, because I've not got enough hens to wait for a year. I've paired hens up at 5 months, and they've been breeding 3 years later. I remember going down to a guy I tell you what, it was Richard Barthorpe. He'd bought some birds off Joe Manners. I think they were bar heads, and they'd paired up, and they were laying in the corner of the cage you were keeping them in, and he'd got fertile eggs, and these were all bar heads. What's that tell you? I mean, how's that work? Either he were having me on, or it actually happened. But yeah, I would use them as early as I can, because you have to. And I think you only got to look at the kids today. They started a bit earlier than we did, didn't they? Certainly going back to my we had to get married before we did anything like that, and now the kids are having kids at 11 years of age, aren't they? So I think biology wise, they're all okay. No,
anyway, but I suppose it differs between birds and lines, etc. So I'm just going to ask you one last question, because it's been 2 hours amazingly. The time has just flown. So thank you to everyone who has watched. But one last question: can you remember a pair that have bred so well for you and have been like a really influential pair. So, for instance, I know Gerald Binks always talked about his Nest Box 26, where he put birds down and that a pair turned out, just kept churning out these amazing birds. Did you ever have that? Was there one particular pair in one particular year that just sort of sent you to a whole completely different level?
Well, that's an easy one to answer, John. No. But having said that, okay. Jeff Bowley had pair 15 that there were a pair of cinnamons. He bred 57 pair off that. 57 chicks off that pair. It was a till death us do part pairing. When he saw what were coming out, he kept them going. Those cinnamons set him and other people, me included, up for quite some time. So I would say to anyone, you hear the older guys saying, give them 2 rounds, split them up. The more modern guys will say, give them 3, 4 rounds, and I will say, till death us do part, because it's very difficult to breed and make these pairings that will produce the budgies you want. If you've got a pair that are doing it, and you can get 57 off them, get them while you can. They will tell you when they're uncomfortable breeding. They'll tell you when they've had enough. Don't think that you're punishing them, because you're not. They would not breed for that length of time, 2 years or whatever it might be, if they weren't happy to do so. So if you're fortunate enough to get the situation you're talking about, John, just milk it. Just milk it. And they'll tell you when they've had enough.
I think I was a bit hasty saying I'm going to ask you, that was the last question. This will be the last question. So I know you're very proud of being a founder member of the Exhibition Budgerigar Forum. It's now 10 years old, incredibly. I'm proud that I've been a member of it pretty much, I think, from a week into its inception. It's there's been some ups and downs, but obviously lots of good points. We won't dwell on any negatives, but it's been, it's got 15,000 members, and it's there's hundreds and hundreds of interesting topics on there. It's free to anyone, and I know you've worked incredibly hard to. In terms of the time you've put into it, the advice you've shared, the way you've promoted it, and through it promoted the hobby. Can you just tell us a bit about how you feel about the forum and how proud you are of it, perhaps just for members who are not familiar with it, who maybe wanted to join after this?
You would have been in my office tomorrow morning if you'd not have asked that question. You know that, don't
Yeah.
you? I'll just give you a brief outline of how it came about. We were moving into the internet era, and we all had email addresses, and some breeders were having websites, etc., etc. And I wanted the Budgerigar Society to be part of this, and I suggested that they have a Budgerigar Society forum. I remember going to the library when I first came into the hobby, and saying, "Oh, you got any books on budgies?" And said, "Oh, unfortunately, we've got 2, but they're both out at the minute. One will be back on Friday, and one will be back a week on Thursday." And when you want to glean information, you just can't get enough. And I thought, we need to provide this. And I got the vibes from. Well, I didn't get the vibes. I got told from one past secretary, Mick, the Budgerigar Society will never get involved with a forum. So I thought, well, that's a little bit negative. So there was myself, Simon, Rob Hughes, and James Theobald at the time, who was a beginner.
Uli.
And Uli, the German Uli. Yeah, he's long gone, but yeah, Uli was our technical guy, and they wanted me as the forefront because I suppose I was a face in the hobby at the time. And I said, I'll only get involved with this if you're all in for the long term, because if you're not, there's no point. And they all said they're in for the long term. And I thought about it, spoke to Jackie about it, and I thought it needs to happen. I wanted the EBF to be called the Budgerigar Society Forum. Every big company were having forums, and I felt that we should as well. So on the basis of that, we called it the Exhibition Budgerigar Forum. One guy in particular had massive section that we called it the Exhibition Budgerigar Forum. What about the pet people? It's very strange how today he's got a Facebook group called the Exhibition Budgerigar Facebook group, or words to that effect. So, you know, we did cater for the pet people. We had a pet section on there, as you know, John, and I am so proud of it. And if it was around when I came into the hobby, I'd have never have been off it, because our archive sections are so big now that you can find out anything. And we have some very experienced breeders, as you know, that are only too willing. We just sit here we sat here waiting for people to come on who we can help. So I think it's been a boon. I know it's been a boon. I know people love it because they tell me. I go to shows and they say, Mick, I love the forum. I say, why don't you come on more then? Why don't you contribute? Oh, well, I'm more of a watcher than a contributor. And that's fine. We're happy for that, because we do need you, but we also need some content. Also, you're just going to hear me, Simon, John, Kev, and a few others that, you know, are posting all the time. We try all the time. If some of the threads you feel are a bit silly, it's because we're trying to entertain you in lockdown, and things like that. So, but from a budget perspective, it's a boom. It's stood the test of time. I think people will be talking about it in years and years and years' time, when forums are long gone. I think they'll refer back to the Exhibition Budgerigar Forum. We've got people from all over the world. We've got quite a big foreign section, foreign breeders, thousands of foreign breeder members who come on a regular basis to be with us. And yeah, I think we're all so proud of it, the people who have been involved over the years. And I'd just like to thank the members who are regular contributors, and I'd also like to thank the members who come on to see what those contributors have contributed, because without them, it's like football without fans, I guess, you know. Yeah, so I'm so proud of it, John, and I thank you personally for your help, and I also thank everyone else who's been involved and has helped us to create what we have.
Fantastic. Well, Mick, I've still got about another hour's worth of questions, but they might have to wait for another time. That's been 2 hours of Mick Freakley. Thank you very much, Mick, for being so open and candid, and for sharing your thoughts and experiences, and some really wonderful anecdotes. So thank you very much. I do hope you win the club show again. I know that you'd like to win it with a light green in particular. So, but I'm sure you do, just as long as it wins. And I wish you every success. And again, thank you from everyone on behalf of the Exhibition Budgerigar Forum and the fancy at large for giving us your time this evening. So thank you very much, Mick.
Well, thank you, John, and thanks to everyone who's looked in tonight. I hope you've been entertained. I hope I've not been too boring. And I'd just like to say, please keep safe. Families are more important. Let's not worry about the shows. Let's let's get through this, and we'll see you all on the Exhibition Budgerigar Forum. Thank you. Good night.
And that's a wrap.